At the start of the 90s, Covenant Ministries invited Mike to put together a radio station for their Restoration Bible Weeks. I was a newsreader, and of course, this being Mike, it all had to be done properly. There was no buying in news from some rich media mogul. We had to go to Birmingham several weekends to get proper journalistic training. Our friendship continued after that. He often used to bring me up to write and record promos with him for his many shows, not just CNBC, but UDB, Cross Rhythms. He'd never seen the TV show Red Dwarf, so he didn't know he had a namesake. It was absolutely perfect um, because he was doing the breakfast show at that time. So there he was as Ace Rimmer. Smoke me a kipper, I'll be back for the breakfast show. Ace Rimmer, what a guy. And he certainly was. He was always generous in encouraging others in their work. He used to push my work a great deal. He interviewed me. He got me to do my one-woman show at Cross Rhythms. He made me promise that he could have the scoop interview when I got my first feature film made, which is just heartbreaking because that is actually going to be released next year. But there we go. He also is the person who got my children's book out there. I'd written this book in the late 80s, and because of the recession, I couldn't get a publisher. And he said, let's abridge it and you record it, and we will actually broadcast it along the whole week of the Bible week. And that meant that I actually had a recording of it after that. So I was able to run off cassettes and CDs and get it out there. It now exists as an actual book, but since it was Mike who first got it out there, I would like that to be my tribute to him, a short reading from it. Jairus' Girl. This is just after the feeding of the 5,000. The weather was quite windy. It looked as if the rains might be continuing soon, so Tammy's group decided to walk through part of the night if they could. They were all feeling strong and full of energy after their good meal, and they had Andrew's basket of leftovers to pick at if they wanted. The track was on high ground around the side of the lake. Tammy could see Peter's boat striking out into the middle. It was being buffeted by the winds, and the 12 were having to row to make headway. Late in the night, when the boat had disappeared into the gloom, Dibbs stopped to look at something. Whenever someone stares, it always tends to make everyone else stare in the same direction to see what they're missing. It didn't take long to spot what Dibbs had seen. There was a small pale blob moving slowly but steadily out into the lake. Dibbs was gazing at it in a mixture of terror and disbelief, and other people rubbed their eyes. It was strange the way the moonlight played tricks with the eyes, but it looked exactly as if... It really was exactly like... In fact, even if you had been there, you couldn't have helped wondering. They looked at each other, and even though they could tell they were all thinking the same thing, no one dared say it out loud. It was little Jakey who spoke first. He'd been dozing in Tobias's arms, and when he woke, he naturally looked to see what was fascinating everyone else. He started chuckling and pointed to the blob.
Jesus! Daddy? Says, silly Jesus, he forgot to take a boat.
Tobias was intensely embarrassed that it should be his child who had voiced such a preposterous thing, but Jakey was not to be shut up. He started jigging up and down, waving and shouting, Jesus! Jesus! At the top of his voice, and the top of Jakey's voice was pretty loud. It was amazing, but once you began to imagine that this blob really did look very much like a person, it was remarkably easy to think that a head on top of the blob had turned, and an arm had come up from the blob and waved back. They all looked at one another, again with open mouths, and again no one dared speak. They turned and continued their way, shaking their heads as if to clear their brains. Jairus and Naomi stayed watching the blob a little longer, their arms around each other. Tammy just caught her mother whisper, "Well, he said he'd catch them up."